I never imagined my life would take such an unexpected turn during what was intended to be a routine doctor's visit. At 37, I was in the prime of my life, married to a great man named David, and living comfortably in a suburban area near Portland. We'd been married for 10 years, and while our bond was strong, it had fallen into a regular pattern. I believed I knew what to anticipate from life, until one cool October evening when I found myself alone in my doctor's office. Dr. Harris had been my doctor for a few years. He was in his early 40s, tall with salt and pepper hair, and had a calm, comforting personality that made every visit feel welcome. He was a true professional, constantly focused on the task at hand, and I had never considered him anything other than my doctor, until that evening. It had been a very hard day at work, and I nearly canceled my appointment, but something compelled me to go ahead with it. I arrived at the office just before it closed, and the waiting room was vacant, with the lights lowered. The receptionist had already departed for the day, and the only thing I heard was the faint hum of the air conditioner as I sat down, waiting for Dr. Harris to call me in. When he finally opened the door and called my name, I rose up and gave him a tired grin. "I apologize for being late. It has been one of those days." He smiled back, a kind, understanding smile that put me immediately at ease. "Not a problem at all, Jenna. Come in. Let us get you checked out." I followed him into the examination room, and the door clicked shut behind us. The area was peaceful, with overhead lights throwing a soothing glow across the clean white walls. I sat on the examining table as Dr. Harris drew up a stool and opened my file. "So, what brings you here today?" he inquired, his tone professional but with a trace of genuine care. "Just a routine checkup," I said, attempting to shake off the fatigue of the day. "I've been feeling exhausted and anxious lately. I figured it would be a good idea to get things checked out." He nodded, his look attentive as he took a few notes. "Let's start with the basics, then. I'll check your vitals and see how everything is doing." The checkup began as any other: blood pressure, heart rate, and temperature. Dr. Harris was thorough as usual, yet there was something off in the air. A tightness I couldn't pinpoint, but it made my heart race a little faster. Perhaps it was simply the lateness of the hour, the silence of the office, or something else entirely. As he listened to my heartbeat, his hand softly resting on my shoulder, I couldn't help but notice how close he was to me and how his presence seemed to fill the room. I pushed the thought away, telling myself it was simply my imagination, but the sensation persisted. "Your vitals look good," he added, stepping back and taking a few more notes. "But you mentioned being stressed. How are things doing at home? At work?" I hesitated, unsure how much to share. Dr. Harris was always kind and attentive, but this felt more personal than normal. Still, something in his eyes made me want to open up and tell him what had been bothering me. "It's been okay," I finally responded, my voice tinted with apprehension. "Work is hard, and David has been distant lately. We're both quite busy, and it sometimes feels like we're simply going through the motions." He nodded with a sympathetic face. "That is understandable. Marriage can be difficult, particularly when life becomes stressful. However, you must take care of yourself. You need to discover strategies to deal with that tension." "I know," I muttered, feeling a wave of tiredness sweep over me. "It's just hard to find the time." Dr. Harris stood up and approached the counter, grabbing for a little vial of essential oil. "Have you ever used aromatherapy? It can be an excellent method to relax and unwind." I shook my head, curious. "No, I haven't." He opened the vial and presented it to me. "Here, give it a try. It's lavender, very relaxing." I leaned in and inhaled deeply, letting the relaxing aroma flood my senses. "That's nice," I said, feeling some of the tightness in my shoulders loosen. He smiled as he set down the vial and returned to his stool. "Sometimes the little things make a tremendous impact. Taking a few minutes to relax and breathe can assist more than you realize." I nodded, grateful for his advice. But as I gazed at him, I noticed something different about his expression, softer, more personal. The professional barrier that had always existed appeared to have vanished, replaced by a tenderness that made my heart skip a beat. "Thank you, Dr. Harris," I murmured quietly. "Thank you for taking the time to listen. It means a lot." He stretched out and softly placed his hand on mine, sending chills down my spine. "Jenna, I am always there if you need to talk. About anything." When I gazed up at him, my breath caught in my throat. Something in his gaze struck me as unusual, and it caused my heart to speed. I knew I should remove my hand away and keep things professional, but I couldn't bring myself to do so. "Thank you," I said softly, my voice shaking. For a minute, we sat there, our silence weighted with unspoken feelings. And suddenly, before I could grasp what was going on, Dr. Harris moved in and crushed his lips to mine. The kiss was delicate at first, as if he was allowing me to pull away. But when I didn't, it got deeper, his hand moving to the back of my neck and gripping me tight. My mind begged me to stop, to remember that I was married and that this was my doctor, but my body wouldn't listen. I kissed him back, my hands grabbing the side of the examination table as I surrendered to the moment. It was wrong, I knew, but it was also exhilarating in a manner I hadn't experienced in years. The passion, the intensity, it was tremendous and consumed me entirely. When we eventually parted ways, we were both out of breath and our hearts were hammering together. I stared at him, my mind whirling with shame, want, and confusion. "Jenna," he said, his voice full of sadness, "I'm sorry. I should not have done that." I shook my head, attempting to dispel the emotional fog that was spinning around in my mind. "No, I should not have let it happen. We can't do this," he said, his hand still on my shoulder. "You're my patient, and you are married. This is wrong, and we both understand it." "I know," I said, just above a whisper. "But..." The word hung in the air between us, filled with unspoken emotions. I didn't know what to say or how to process the feelings that were rushing inside of me. I knew it was terrible, that I should go and never look back, but I also knew that something had changed between us that couldn't be reversed. "Maybe it's best if we end the appointment here," Dr. Harris said, his tone soft but forceful. "We can reschedule for another time, when things are clearer." I nodded, but I wasn't sure I could find clarity just now. I slid from the examination table, my legs wobbly, reaching for my coat. "Thank you, Dr. Harris," I replied, my voice shaking. "I'm sorry if I made things difficult." "You didn't," he said immediately, his gaze softening. "This is on me. I apologize for crossing a line. I'm not sure what came over me." I mustered a grin, but it felt like a grimace. "That's okay. Really." He didn't say anything else as he led me to the door, the quiet between us thick with unresolved tension. As I stepped out into the corridor, I returned my gaze to him for the final time. "Take care of yourself, Jenna," he whispered quietly, his eyes filled with sadness and something else, something that made my heart hurt. "I will," I said quietly, and then I left, the door closing softly behind me. The journey home was a blur, my thoughts racing from what had just happened. How had I let things spiral out of control? How could I have allowed myself to kiss Dr. Harris, a man who had treated me with nothing but professionalism and kindness for years? What did this mean for my marriage and life? When I eventually pulled into the driveway, I sat in the car for a while, trying to collect my thoughts. The house was dark, indicating that David wasn't home yet. I should have felt relieved, but instead I felt a strong sensation of loneliness and isolation. The guilt was tremendous, but so was the need and longing that had awoken within me. The ensuing days were filled with confusion and guilt. I couldn't quit thinking about Dr. Harris, how he kissed me and how his touch made me feel. I knew it was terrible, but it was also intoxicating in a manner I hadn't experienced in years. The passion, the intensity, it was something I had not felt in my marriage in a long time, and it worried me how much I desired it. Naturally, David saw the change in me. He inquired whether everything was fine and if anything was bothering me, but I dismissed it, telling him it was just stress from work. He appeared to accept my explanation, but skepticism lingered, casting a shadow over our meetings. A week later, I received a call from Dr. Harris's office, asking if I wanted to reschedule my appointment. I hesitated, unsure what to do. A part of me wanted to see him again, talk to him, and try to make sense of what had transpired between us. But another part of me understood it was risky. I was playing with fire. In the end, I decided to go ahead with it. I needed closure. I needed to know what had happened and why. I wanted to know if it was just a moment of weakness or if there was anything more between us. When I got to the office, my heart was beating. The receptionist greeted me with a pleasant grin, entirely ignorant of the agony within me. I took a seat in the waiting area, my mind racing as I prepared for the upcoming conversation. When Dr. Harris finally called me in, I rose up on unsteady legs and tried to remain cool. The examination room felt different this time, tense, packed with emotion. I could see the fear in his eyes as he shut the door behind us. "Jenna," he said softly, "I'm glad you decided to come in. I think we should discuss about what happened." I nodded, my throat tight from emotion. "I agree." He took a deep breath and perched on the stool with his hands clenched together. "First and foremost, I'd like to apologize for crossing the line. It was unprofessional and should never have occurred." "I'm just as much to blame," I said quickly, not wanting him to bear all of the shame. "I kissed you back. I let it happen." He shook his head and smiled sadly. "I should have known better. Jenna, you are my patient, and I care about your well-being. What happened was a mistake, and I apologize for any distress." I stared down at my hands, attempting to find the appropriate words. "It's just. I have not felt this way in a long time. And I suppose I was. I do not know. I felt connected to you." He stretched out and softly grasped my hand, his touch warm and comforting. "Jenna, you're a fantastic person. And I am flattered that you feel this way. But we both understand that this cannot go any further. You're married, and I have a duty to you as your doctor." I nodded as tears welled up in my eyes. "I understand. I don't know how to deal with these feelings." "Feelings can be complicated," he remarked quietly, his thumb lightly stroking the back of my hand. "However, you should consider what is most essential to you, what you truly desire. And I believe you understand that going down this path is not the answer." I gazed up at him, my vision clouded by tears. "I don't want to lose my marriage, but I don't want to lose you either." He smiled, a sad but knowing smile. "You aren't losing me, Jenna. I'll always be there for you as a doctor and someone who cares about you. But we need to keep things professional for both of our sakes." I nodded, knowing he was correct. It was the reasonable and responsible thing to do. But it didn't make things easier. As the appointment ended, I rose up, my heart heavy from everything that had been spoken. Dr. Harris led me to the door, putting his hand softly on my shoulder. "Take care of yourself, Jenna," he murmured quietly, his eyes wide with concern. "And if you ever need to talk, I'm here." "Thank you," I said softly, my voice shaking. "I appreciate that." With that, I exited the office, the door closing behind me with such finality that my chest ached. The journey home was a blur, my thoughts racing from all that had happened. I knew it was the right option. I needed to focus on my marriage and find a way to reconnect with David. However, it did not make the anguish any less genuine. In the weeks that followed, I pushed myself into my marriage, attempting to rekindle the connection that had been lost. I scheduled date evenings, attempted to have meaningful talks, and made an effort to be more present in our relationship. And gradually, things started to improve. David sensed the shift in me and responded in kind, strengthening our closeness with each passing day. But there was still a part of me that couldn't forget Dr. Harris and how he made me feel. It was a recollection that stayed in the back of my mind, a reminder of the boundary I'd crossed and the implications of my decisions. In the end, I knew I had made the proper decision. My marriage was worth fighting for, and I was committed to making it work. But I also knew I'd learned an important lesson about the value of limits and the perils of allowing emotions to cloud your judgment. As I continued on, I carried with me the recollection of that October evening, the moment when everything changed. It served as a reminder of the thin line that separates desire and devastation, as well as the decisions we make that shape our lives.